Sophie, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get into all the stuff that we want to talk about today too.
Yeah, it's interesting because we connected via LinkedIn, right? And then we kind of had a chat on your podcast, and I was like, well, we have to continue this conversation around just burnout and how do we manage all these things and how do we maintain this high performance in a world where that's expecting more and more of us, right? But at the same time, staying true to ourselves and our culture and background and all these things. So before we dive into all of that, let's talk a little bit more about your background. So my audience
Mm.
has a better understanding of the context of where you come from and the journey that you've had so far.
Yeah, I think as a summary and a long story cut short, my career was really around building and leading people functions in high growth companies, and then I led myself into like the startup world. And to be perfectly honest, that is where my passion lies. It's building from 0 to 1. And I used to find a lot of joy actually doing a lot of these people work because I feel deeply connected to people relationships. I enjoy building meaningful relationships and intertwining it all into building out cultures as well. And then eventually I got to a point where I hit burnout myself. And then I had to take stock in what was really meaningful for myself until I came out and did consulting. Part and parcel of it was because of COVID. But at the same time, I found that being able to choose my own work, being able to choose the startups I go into without having to really worry about a paycheck to paycheck kind of situation has actually brought me into, I would say, a much more meaningful world when I'm talking about building out people functions and culture. So it's almost like I get to choose my own work. And on the side of that, I coach high performers as well as basically female leaders and high performing females who basically just want to win all without the burnout. So that's a long story cut short in terms of the
Yeah.
evolution in the last decade.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll kind of dive into some of those pieces throughout the conversation. I'm curious, when you hurt your burnout, I'm always wondering, were there symptoms or was it just like 0 to 100 and you're done? Or like, were there symptoms? Like how does one come to that, I guess?
Yeah, you know what? Over the duration of the podcast that I've been running for a whole year now, I have actually realized that there were signs because I'm learning from other people's experiences. But to be perfectly frank, for myself, I went from 0 to 100. I went from going like 1,000 miles an hour, thinking that I can spin all the plates that was in front of me. Either it's personal, work, relationships, whatever that you can think of under the umbrella. And at some point, it just kind of went like 2 a.m. I quit my job and I never looked back. So for me, it was a 0 to 100. But now that I'm reflecting on my own journey, also because I've learned from other people, there were definitely very, very loud signs for me. For example, I'm not sleeping well. It's like I wear a Whoop band and it's constantly telling me that even if I'm not exercising, my strain is super high for some reason. My stress
Mm.
level is super high and I'm not getting like quality sleep. I'm sleeping because the hours are long enough, but at the same time, I'm not recovering. So like if anybody wears a Whoop band, you know that your recovery has 3 different colors, right? Red,
Mm-hmm.
yellow, and green. Mine was for months in the reds. And it's almost like
Wow.
something is giving up, but at the same time, I was functioning. It's this autopilot mode that I would go to work, crack on, finish the day, come home, try and get a really good sleep, which I thought was good sleep. And then it just went away. I was just
Yeah.
in the red, in the recovery mode the whole time. And, it took me months to actually come back to the green as well. So it's not a one time thing and it's not something that you change overnight.
Yeah. No, it's interesting about the Whoop. I also wore Whoop for a while. And I remember at points, I was like trying to figure out, like, I would wake up and I'd be like, okay, before I look at my Whoop, like, how do I feel? Like, how do
Mm,
I feel? And it's like, oh, like, I feel fine. And then my Whoop would be like, you're exhausted and you don't need to do anything today. And I'm like, what is going on? So, and it's like, but then, I think this is where I struggle, honestly. And I'm curious your thoughts on this because like a high performer, I think it's part of your DNA to just be on, right? Like, and so like for me, it's very much like I'm like, cool, I can't really rest. I'm just gonna keep pushing, which sounds like what you've done, right? And it's like it's very hard, at least personally for me, to turn off the gas to the pedal. And that's why it's almost like I'm like, I'll just hit burnout, I'll be okay. Like
yeah.
it's really self-destructing, and that happened to me twice. I think now I'm better, obviously, at it. but I think it also got with some age. But I also have a very strong understanding of where it comes from me, and it's this idea of it's never enough, it's never good enough, and that comes from me from culturally, from my upbringing. My parents did an amazing job. They meant the best for me. But what that best meant was that I am an overachiever, high performer to a point where I will burn myself out. Right. And I always have to keep going. So what are your thoughts on that? And like,
Yeah,
is that,
I
does that relate, I guess?
For sure, for sure. I relate 100% to it because I think a lot of my high performers and high achieving attitude also comes from my cultural upbringing. And I think to the point where you are saying, you know, your parents brought you up. My parents have done an amazing job to groom me into who I am today. But at the same time, I think the way that they were preparing me wasn't for the society that I was growing up in, right? So I come from a Chinese background, but then I also grew up in Australia. There was no real pressure around me to actually just be right on the top all the time. For them, when I go to school, there's no pyramid, there's no hills to climb, there's no mountains to climb. But here I am going to school having a completely different experience. And then when I go home, my mom and dad are telling me that I need to be better in everything. So it's almost like there's this cognitive dissonance for me. For a long time, I struggled to kind of understand, where do I belong? Where is my sweet spot? I think I only really found out about, you know, what type of person I should be and my own identity, at least until I was probably in my 30s. So there was definitely a long journey for me to get to a point where I now know what gives me joy. I now know what attainable happiness is, and I now know what achievement means to me. Because for a long time, I think I was just going through this achievement list that was probably just handed down to me. Again, I think exactly like what you said, my parents brought me up in the best way they can, but it's probably in the wrong society.
Yeah. It's just interesting because I'm like, I wonder if there's a formula that we can, where we put the high performance with the high achievement, but then also with this understanding of balance. And I think about this topic at all. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and just people very much like yourself that are just like on the go and have hit burnout. And and it seems like it only comes with age. It only comes with experience. Like, I think it's just I always call it like it's a process, and a process takes time. And you can't avoid like going through the process. And I'm just like, it's just what it is. And I'm grateful to be on the other side of it. But I also think, and I'm curious what you think about this. I also think that in your 20s and 30s, this is your time to really push yourself. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
I also see the flip side and the work that I do when I see people in their 30s and 40s and they have no ambitions, no high performing energy, very stagnated, very much so. And that's because they lived a very soft life, for the lack of a better word, right? And then and I'm okay if people are like, listen, I'm just happy this way. But I also see the same individuals in their 30s and 40s asking themselves why they haven't achieved specific success in their life. And then I would ask, like, well, I would look back and reflect on their journey. I'm like, well, you haven't really worked towards your goals because you just kind of, floated along.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the trickiest thing about being a high performer and achiever is the fact that we repel the word complacency so much that it becomes a fear for us. That's why we look
Mm,
around us and we see anybody else, especially in the time that we are hustling really hard for the career that we dream of, we desire of, right? For whatever reasons you're in that career, it is what you're working on, right? But at the same time, I think we are so fearful of turning into the people we don't want to be. And those are the people around us that we feel like their career is stagnant. They're probably living in complacency. They don't have this drive in them. You almost can't at some point engage in a meaningful conversation with them because you're like, you're not getting it, right? Why are you living your life this way when I'm trying to thrive for everything that I want and I'm working hard for what I want? But it's only until I've gone through all of that journey that I realize at some point people just have a different meaning that they're looking forward to. Like right now, if you're telling me to go and hustle, I would still tell you that I'm ready to hustle. whatever it is, bring it on. I'm ready for it because I think it's innate that your high achiever mode and your high performing mode is in you. The only difference is now I'm no longer trying to prove myself to others. I'm only trying to prove myself to myself. And that's the big difference, right? The driver for that burnout is because you're trying to people please all the time. You want the accolades and you want the critical acclaims and you want all the promotions that's handed to you because you worked hard for it. But at the same time, if I were to reflect on my own journey, I never once pat myself on the shoulder and be like, job well done today. It's only Monday. You've got this. It's going to be a big week for you. But as a leader, it's so easy for me to say, job well done, crack on. The team's doing really well, right? Singing praises to others is so much easier than singing praises to myself. So I think it depends on which life stage you're in and what are you looking for when it comes to meaningful purpose that drives you for whatever hardworking stuff that you're working towards. It just happens differently for different people. But you're absolutely right. I remember in my early 20s, I can't engage in a conversation with people who are not ambitious. Like I call it out, right? I've lost friends because of it. It's because I just can't seem to have this conversation with them when I'm talking about maybe my boss, my workplace, the next promotion, the money I'm going to be making, the mortgage, the next house, and all these things that you're trying to work for. But then this other person sits in front of you and go like, nah, you'll be fine. Life's too short for that kind of stuff. I couldn't comprehend it either.
Yeah, I relate to this so much, and I feel like this is a therapy session for myself because you're totally right. Like when I was in my 20s to 30s, and if it's still now to an extent, but it's much less. I felt like I was always trying to prove something to somebody, and to me, a lot of it was like to my parents, like, see, I did this thing, like, see, I'm successful. It's like I am kind of what you ingrained me to be type thing. And of course there's like other people throughout, and I think that's where it comes, like, as you grow older. I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago, and I always say, like, my level of just caring about anybody else's opinion is so much lower, like, all of a sudden. It's wild. But when my 20s and 30s, it was very much this energy was very much fueled by what I need to prove to other people and how I appear to other people, right? And just like yourself, in some of the conversations, for me in particular, it was in my dating life. I would come off as somebody who only talks about work and business, but that's because that's what's exciting to me, and that was my passion, and it still is, and I really like to talk about these topics. Now I'll probably throw in some other topics like longevity and like the hormone game and like like other topics that are interesting to me, but all of those topics are around me being a high performer, because the reason I care about longevity is because I want to continue to be a high performer.
Yeah.
So it's like, but that's just what's interesting to me, you know what I mean? And like, I have very low tolerance for like really like kind of, conversations just don't interest me around anything else. I'm frankly speaking, I mean, I'll probably throw in travel in there. I love the travel journey and stuff like that. But yeah, and it's tough. And again, I think it's like one of those things where it takes time to get to this point. But looking back, would I take away that fire, that fuel that, drove me, which is maybe that was negative? Probably not, because otherwise, what do I have? So that was like my fuel to keep going, was the negative pieces, which is like trying to prove myself, doing all the things for the external versus the internal. And now I'm entering this space where it's like, I am doing it more for internal, for my own freedom of life and to be where I want to be, to work with who I want to work with and so on. And I wonder if there's a package that we can create that's like, that has those combinations, that you learn this faster than your 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a magic superpower or a magic packet that we can package it all up, because I actually truly believe that your experience and my experience, although we're of the same age, we've probably gone through very similar experiences and journey. I still think it's very unique because of the conversations and the people we've come across, right? I mean, dare I also say, I got to a point in my career where I was like, this is the only thing I would know how to do forever because I'm so good at it. This will be the only thing that I would know how to do. And you know what? The craziest thing is, if I didn't hit burnout and quit the career that has brought me to where I am today, I would have never thought that I would have hobbies, things that I'm actually good at. Like, I never took time to go diving with a bunch of friends who went diving all the time because I was on my phone. I was working off my laptop. Little did I know, I now know how to dive and I actually enjoy it. Heck, can I also say that I'm pretty good at it? Like, it's this kind of journey that you kind of go through because when you're so consumed by the one thing only, you tend to think that this is the only thing you're going to be capable of. And that was at least true for me. I thought HR was the only thing I would ever know how to do, but I didn't remember that. I used to do mechanical engineering and then I went into HR and then I got good at it, right? You start to diminish your own value because of this whole serving others attitude for so long. This autopilot mode
Mm.
was probably what got me to my burnout, that I found no more joy in anything else other than the work I was doing.
Mm. That is such a great question to ask yourselves. Like, what is a hobby or a different thing I'm missing out on because I'm so uber focused on this thing that I'm good at, and I just keep pushing. Like, it's such a great reflection question because you're right. Like, you're so much on autopilot a lot of times, and like like honestly, like I look back and I'm like, I don't know where the last 10 years went. Like, I mean, I know,
Um,
like, and I feel like I've achieved a lot and I've done a lot, but it went by so fast. And
yeah.
I think it's gonna go by even faster, right? And I think, yeah, and when especially if you enjoy what you do, it just speeds up and it doesn't feel like work. But then at the same time, it just you don't pause. You don't pause to think, at least not intentionally to think like, what else is there for me, And then like that's my biggest fear. I have to admit, my biggest fear is
Mm,
getting to my like 70s and 80s and being and looking back and knowing that I should have done X, Y, and Z, but I didn't, and regretting that. Like, to me, that's like my biggest fear is regret of life that I could have lived. Like, and it's like, but that goes back to that, the person who wants to control the situation in me. You know what I mean? I want to control the situation. I want to control the outcome. I want to make sure it all works out perfectly. Like, it's these high expectations, right? That are very hard to manage.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's a great reflection question.
Tell you something that actually makes me even more fearful than thinking that I'm in my 70s and then looking back that I have amounted to all of these things that probably didn't make sense to me. My biggest fear is actually to sit quietly in a room on my own, have a blank sheet of paper, and actually write down what gives me joy. That has been the scariest moment for me because if I have to write down 10 things that gives me joy and it has direct relationship with the work that I am doing, what am I doing here? What is the
Mm,
purpose of me? And I remember having to do that exercise with my coach. That was the scariest moment that I've actually had to go through. It was so surreal to me that the entirety, I have friends, I have relationship, I have a good family that supports me. But the thing I wrote down on that blank sheet of paper was everything to do with work. That just means I haven't lived. And that was kind of like
mm,
one of those turning point moments for me that I have to be able to not just serve my employer. Now, I know for a fact that, I work on my own, I'm a consultant, I'm building out my burnout stuff. But at the same time, even if it's working on my own, I'm still carrying the same baggage. I'm carrying the same working attitude in serving of others. That was when I knew I had to stop. I had to stop everything that I was doing and I had to reinvent myself for me to be really comfortable with what serves me today. If today is about
mm.
turning a page on the book that I haven't touched and it's actually getting a little dusty on the bookshelf, that is me today. But it's so difficult to go there. So many people have these golden advice. Of course, they say, look down on your feet. Where are you today? Feel grateful. I can do all of that. But if my mind was still going into recovery as a performance, in the sense that I'm going to nail recovery, I'm going to recover faster than someone else, I'm going to XYZ this as a high performer, then you're doing the wrong thing. That's not the point.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's when I think recovery, like even with the whole whoop, I actually stopped wearing whoop because I went into like it needs to be always green. Like, what am I doing wrong? And I got like, I think they called like whoop anxiety or whatever. And I was like, man, screw this. Like, I love it. Don't, no shade on whoop. It's me. I'm the problem. But like, and because then it's like, it's funny because when I would see it in yellow and I'd be like, but I feel fine. You're not gonna stop me today, whoop. You know what I mean? If it's in red, I'm like, no, I want to go for a jog. I want to go for a workout. I feel like I want to move. So I would like literally have these fights, and it would stress me out because I'm like, because then I have this
Mm,
battle. I'm like, well, I actually I want to keep pushing myself because I have like a whatever, I don't know, an intense hike coming up. I need to train and I need to do, and it's like it's a battle, man. It's a continuous battle. And as you're speaking about this, and I'm just, I'm hearing so much of, I guess, like I said, it's a therapy session for me, but it's like, it's interesting because you are like your own worst critic, your worst
Yeah.
enemy in some cases, and it is very hard to manage the mind, but what have you found that's been helpful to you through, like, you know what I mean? Like, what advice would you give somebody like me?
Okay, so this is a
What's
good
worked for you?
question.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
throughout the journey of my recovery, obviously part of the recovery is learning from others, like people who have very similar experiences so that I feel relatable. So I'm one of those people that don't really learn from the reading, but learn from the doing. So having to listen to other people's real life examples and their journey has really amounted to quite a lot for me in terms of my recovery journey. I would say that I sprung back up to action within like week or two and started going out running again and started feeling like myself again. But it was the rewiring of my head that I actually needed to do. And there was much more work to be done. So I would say there's something that we always underestimate is we think that burnout is, yes, it's an outcome, but it can also very much be a symptom. And that means your body burning out is actually trying to tell you something else that is missing in your life. So, I've done my research. I've just finished my master's in organizational psychology. And basically, there are a few very, very common drivers that are driving people to their burnout point. But it doesn't mean they can't come back from it. Because you know how you hear people go through burnout from one place to another? They may change workplaces, they may change bosses, but burnout seems to be following them. It's like a shadow that
Mm-hmm.
never really leaves. It's because they haven't actually decoupled themselves from their burnout driver. Now, this is really interesting for me to even learn. Burnout drivers are actually what drives you to your burnout point, but it's your coping mechanism. It's your self mechanism in the sense that this is a safety net. So all the behaviors that you have created for yourself that leads you to burnout, it's a safety net for you to feel like you're protecting yourself because the environment doesn't. So for
Mm.
example, right, for example, I'll give you a coupling. I am a high performer, so my burnout comes from achievement. And so the driver of my burnout is actually to never stop, to continue to achieve. For as long as there is something in front of me that I can tell myself that it's achieving, I'm going to keep going until I'm 90, until I'm 5 feet under. And that's your
Uh-huh.
burnout driver. It's what you have learned. And if you go back a few 10 steps, why have you created these drivers and these attitudes to protect you from what? It's the self critic. It's probably because there was one fine day that my teacher in the classroom when I was 7 has told me I'm never going to be good enough. So I carried that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if my parents never did that to me, because sometimes it's not just from home, it could be your environment. And so this is the thing that people don't really learn from when they go through their burnout. And that's why it follows them like a shadow. It's to really learn what the burnout drivers are and then decouple them from your past. Why has it even appeared? What is the safety mechanism that you have created for yourself? So that's a really big question that people really should be asking themselves. It's not the burnout. Get through it, recover however you need to, take your time, but ask the bigger question. Why am I self-protecting all the time? What's driving this? Then you know.
It's actually an excellent point. I never thought about it from that perspective, but as I'm thinking about it, it's it completely makes sense. Yeah, because and that's the hard part. I think that's why, like, for me, I've hit it twice, and I think it's the behaviors you created, like, and we are, creatures of habit, and these are specific behaviors related to the burnout piece, right? And it's almost like it's like a continuous circle because you're like, you know what I mean? You continuous, like, you're never getting out of this loop until you recognize those behaviors. And this is why I'm like, this is why, it drives me crazy. Listen, I'm all up for like breath work and yoga and all those things. Like, sign me up. But I've done all these things because being a performer, I want to, like you said, I want to focus on recovering well. Like, I've done the sound baths. I've done all the things, Funny thing, the only thing that actually calms me down is when I'm somewhere in Asia. So that is one thing I have to say. There's something magical about places like Bali and Thailand and other, like, I don't know what it is. So, like, this is the only, I've been to 50 plus countries, Sophie. It's the only solution I've found so far is when I'm in Thailand or Indonesia. This is the only time. So I'm starting to. I was telling my fiance, I was like, I think I need to, like, just live there, Anyway, so, but all jokes aside, there's something magical about this place. It's the only place I feel calm. Like, it's wild. Anyway, But yeah, so I'm all up on these things, and I think it's good when you take a vacation, but it doesn't help change the behavior. It's a band-aid that you're putting on a broken leg. And I
Exactly. But
think,
you're also,
yeah.
yeah, but I think it's really important that you touched on that point, because I also want to make a point to say that whatever that is innate in you is not meant to change. You're a high
Mm,
performer by nature. You get the most joy probably by hitting your achievements, and no one can ever take that away from you, right? And the reality, what high performers and achievers need is to actually find a way to learn how to stretch this rubber band even further. And when it comes back to the same shape. Building resilience for a high performer is entirely different. That's why I was so, that's why out loud I'm telling you, in 2 weeks after my burnout, I started getting good sleep. I went back running again. I run, I cycle, I do spin, I do Pilates, all the things that you can imagine. It never stopped me physically. I knew what I needed to do was rewire my mindset. But rewire my mindset isn't, how I'm super allergic to when people say, if you've hit burnout, take a rest, don't do anything, don't push yourself too hard. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I've hit a roadblock, I need to push myself harder to get over this hurdle, because all I see
right.
is going over, never under, right?
Mhm.
So what high performers need is resilience, but resilience is going to come in very unique shapes and sizes. So if it's for you when you're in Asia, I mean, I raise my hand and I say, I'm actually right now in Thailand. So I understand what you mean about the peace and quiet and the calmness that surrounds. It's because the environment doesn't require me to be performing. So
Mm,
automatically, I want to perform myself in different ways. So I'm running more. I'm hitting more kilometers than I ever did because no one's putting the pressure on me, right?
mm,
So it's about, what I really have to say is, never underestimate that there is going to be uniqueness when it comes to people's recovery journey. And for high performers, as far as I've seen and I've coached, it's all about resilience. It's increasing their resilience so that they can take on more and they don't hit burnout the next time, or when they come close to burnout, they recognize the signs so that they can keep passing hurdles, and they are going to keep achieving things in life. And that is something is so innate that shouldn't ever be taken away. So,
mm.
it depends on what kind of advice you're getting. I remember getting advices about, like, just take a break, don't do any work for about 3 months. But in 2 weeks' time, I'm like, what am I doing with myself? I don't know what to do. I cannot function. If I read a book, I'm going to
Yeah.
read it faster so that I can finish it because I now have the time, you know? So it's not about
Yeah.
changing, but you're unique.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it, and you're right. Like, and it's also not everybody's able to take 3 months. Not everybody's even able is even to take 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? It's just not like like when people give this advice, so they're like, "Oh, just don't," like they're like, "Oh, just relax." Like, do you know the responsibilities I have? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they don't also like. And granted, a lot of these responsibilities are probably self-induced, but nonetheless, like I think it's when we first talk, you said something, and you're like, when you tell a high performer, don't do this, it's going to make you stress out even more. Instead,
Yeah.
work with a, like, kind of like, you were kind of getting to a point where it's like, work with a high performer in a way that works for them and try to understand those behaviors versus trying to put like these band-aids that are like standard for everybody. And there's a very big difference between, telling somebody who works 4 hours a day, barely does their job, and they just chill all day to go do yoga. Of course, they'll relax. But when you're running at 12 hours a day, and that's your life for the last 20 years. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're gonna tell me to go do anything that's gonna fix me? Like, that's not that, you know what I mean? Like, it's much deeper than that, to kind of the point that you're getting at. It's just much deeper than that. And I think there are unique solutions to people like myself.
I mean, for
So
sure,
yeah.
I can relate to your whole experience. I'll paint you a picture. When I was just about to go through burnout, this is my day in the life of Sophie. I would go to work. I would probably have 4 or 5 coffees because I actually need the caffeine to keep me going. And I would do 12 hours day. And right after that, I don't go home straight to sleep. I go for a run, or I go and do a dynamic Pilates class, or I go to spin class, or whatever it is, because I needed to get the energy out so that I call it a day and then go home. I'm fully relaxed. But if I didn't do that run that day, I feel like when I went home, I'm fidgety. I'm either trying to do the dishes, or I'm trying to mop the
Mm,
floor. I'm trying to clean the house until even if it's midnight. So that was my day in a life when I was going through all of the things without learning how to be resilient. After that, after coming out of burnout, I'm actually still doing the same. I may have already gone for a run, and then I did some errands, and then I drove around town for about 4 or 5 hours just picking people up and doing all the other stuff for other people. I go home, I might still go for another run around the block. It's because that's how I've always spent my energy, just different
Mm.
today. But
Yeah.
it didn't mean
Yeah.
that my entire life has completely changed, that I'm now just bumming around, reading a book, knitting away. Like it doesn't have to be that drastically different. That's why I talk about rewiring your mindset so that you put purpose into the things by also just changing where your energy goes.
Yeah. It's super. It's one of the best conversations I think I've had around this topic. It really is, and I've had a lot of these conversations with people, and I really think it's this rewiring and this behavior piece. That's at least as you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, that would work for somebody like me. You know what I mean? Because every time I've had this conversation, the advice was just very different, or the conversation. So yeah, I really really appreciate this. Is there anything else that you want to mention around this topic that maybe we didn't get to?
I think what I would also say first and foremost is when you're going through burnout, or when you're coming out of burnout, the last thing you want to do is blame yourself. A lot of us
Mm,
ingest that guilt, that shame, and then we do a lot of the self-blame. I didn't have enough boundaries. I didn't say no when I should. I didn't protect myself. Actually, a lot of the times it's circumstantial, or the environment has basically asked you to be a certain type and carry certain behaviors for you to actually be able to go through day by day. So the first thing you actually should never ever do is blame yourself. Because trust me, no one is blaming you when you're going through that burnout. You may be carrying shame like I did. As a leader of a team, I carried the shame for a long time, for at least, actually for a long time, until one of my team members, ex-team members then, came back to me and go, "You've done everything you can for us. The environment just has eaten you up alive. It's not your fault." I didn't
mm,
have to wait until that moment for someone else to tell me that I didn't have to blame myself. And that was the problem, right? Because there is a lot of this self-blame, guilt, and shame that goes on emotionally. And it's also, burnout happens when you're feeling most vulnerable. It's like you can't cope with everything that was going on with you, and then suddenly it just exploded. It's about picking up the pieces
yeah.
and feel confident that you can pick up the pieces, right? And don't ever have anyone else tell you completely change you. There are going to be many, many good things that you have accumulated over the years that is going to make you make you stronger and more resilient moving on. It's just about tapping back into those things. And the same for people who are thinking, this career doesn't work for me anymore. I'm going to pivot. This is a turning point for me. Perfect. Don't get worried and have the fear about what your new life is going to be looking like. Start thinking about all the things that you have collected over the years in your back pocket. How can you use it moving forward?
Mm,
For me, is one of the best advice I've gotten. And I cannot wait to continue to share this around, because this is what we do. We get stuck in a burnout thinking that everything has failed us, including ourselves, and we cannot get out of this. It's not true.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love what you're saying. Sophie, do you have, I think you mentioned you have a book coming out. I know you have one that already out, but you have a new one coming out. Am I right?
I'm in the middle of writing. I'm in the middle of writing this, and this is really about, if I can share a little bit, this is really about
Yeah.
a recovery journey that is most authentic to you. And this is about becoming the reformed club. You're a reformed person of yourself. It's not that you're entirely different. You don't have to switch your identity. You can still be called who you are, and you can still go and do the things that you're very, very good at. Perhaps now is in a different state, different position, different environment with different people. But you yourself, what I really wanted to use the book to actually set as a reminder is you don't have to change as much as other people are telling you to, because it's not one
Mm,
size fits all, like you said. And coming back from yourself and becoming a second 2.0 of yourself is actually far more interesting and more fun.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Listen, when the book comes out, obviously let me know, but also would love to have you back and we'll talk about the book, and we'll talk, we'll dive into the book, so when it
Absolutely.
releases, I think it'll be super good. Yeah, and I'll definitely share with my audience and so on. Sophie, this has been beautiful. Really. Thank you so much.
I'm glad we managed to have this conversation. And just, I was talking about the burnout drivers. If anybody are curious about why they're going through burnout and what their burnout drivers are, my website, the Burnout Detox Kit .com, has the free tests and the analysis there. So go crazy. It's completely free. Go and try it out just as a starting step to understand yourself a bit more.
Beautiful. And I'll put it in the show notes as well. So we'll have that there.